audio. Beautiful. So, can anyone tell me how is your progress with the project? I know that some of you hasn't been started yet, but like in general, who started the project and did something? Ooh. Everyone, right? Anyone? No? I hope you remember that we have just 1 week to go, right? So we don't have any exercises for this week. The whole week should be about project. So we need to spend this week for the project. But I thought that you might start it and basically do something for the project. No? No? Nobody? Okay. Okay, so it means that this weekend will be busy, right? But yeah, I suggest you to start right like today and do something. Build your first page, second page, etc. I already told you that on our YouTube channel we have this carousel, how to build a carousel, so you can basically watch the video. It's like 15 minutes video, so you will be able to create your own carousel. So yeah, but okay, let's start. So CSS Grid is another powerful thing that we have with CSS. So I would say that we have CSS, like basic CSS and like syntax and
yep. Sorry, Vasil, did you share your screen?
You can't see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is odd, but it's saying that I'm sharing, but for some reason, can you see it now? No, not now.
Yes, it's loading now.
Yeah, now. Yep.
Okay.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. If it disappeared, tell me again, because yeah, it should be shared.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So CSS Grid again. So we have CSS, which is great. It is nice to style everything you want. And on some point of time, we got Flexbox, which was crazy thing, revolutionary, right? Like Apple, but better. And everybody was super excited because it allows you to write and create like responsive design much more easier. And after that, we got CSS Grid, which was insane, and it's still insane comparing with like just general styling, like general syntax properties, let's say. And CSS Grid is just another way of styling, and this is CSS. This is just like a not display flex, but display grid. And from that point, you have ability to write your CSS Grid stuff. And so the big thing was that it appeared, so they presented this, I think that like maybe 4 years ago, probably 4 years ago, and that was super crazy. But almost none of any browser, but basically browser didn't support it at all, and that was pain. So Chrome started supporting it like slowly, very slowly, but now it's time to use CSS Grid, because now if you go to our can I use have CSS Grid, you might guess that a good old friend Internet Explorer has some troubles, but in general it is supported, which is great. So now we can safely use CSS Grid and be sure that that will work, which is super crazy. And let's go to CSS Grid so you'll understand why I'm so excited about it. Let me also open Reveal in Finder. Great. I'm pretty sure something is broken. I'm more than sure. Let me just double check. So we have style, normalize. We have CSS Grid. why everything is broken. Like everything. No, not everything, but this font for navigation. Let me double check my examples for some reason. Ooh, I don't have styles for my header. Okay, anyway, Grid Container. Wait a second. Sorry for that. Let me just double check with. For some reason this one is not styled. So we have our navigation. So we have UL, Y. Yeah. For some reason. Sorry for that. Let me find our HTML box direction web flow. I haven't styled it. Okay, anyway, sorry. Let's actually go back and let's talk about Css Grid. So Css Grid, again, we have as you remember, I hope you remember, that in Flexbox we have flex containers and flex items, right? So containers are elements that contain flex items, and here we have the same logic. So we have Css Grid Container, and you can set properties like display grid, and from that point you will be able to have like grid template columns, grid template rows, template areas, template all these properties, and I'll show you what each does. And so we see again with you need to declare display grid to be able to use all these settings, all these properties. And here, so this is container properties, and for item properties we have another thing, which is grid column start, grid column end, grid row start, and column row area justify self. It might remind you Flexbox, align self, place self, and sometimes they are very similar because you have justify content as Flexbox, you have align content, and few more similar things, which is sometimes you might be confused, but you'll get it. So container properties. So we are starting from grid on inline grid. Inline grid means that will be inline with, so it basically the element will behave as inline element, but will have property grid, so you will still be able to use all your CSS grid properties. So let's start from the very beginning. So grid template columns, and here grid template columns. You can easily define the columns, and with this syntax. So I'm defining grid template columns, and I'm creating 3 columns, right? So I have 150 pixels auto and 150 pixels. What it will do for us? Oh, what it will do. So as you can see now, if I inspect the parent, you can see these like a dashed lines. So these are our columns. So we have 3 columns, and we have hard coded, right, 150 and 150. So first and last column will be 150, and the middle one will be responsive. So it will be based on the actual container, right? So the container has some width, which is 80% for us, and each column will take the middle one will be responsive. So if I start resizing, as you can see, we just changing the width for the middle one. I can probably use some different colors. Just background color, I have green, and background color pink. right? So when we're resizing, we're changing the width for the middle one. So it's very easy to define columns, which is great because now you don't need to play with this hard-coded like widths for each cell, etc. You're just creating columns. And you have now, if I add more elements, it will automatically populate the stuff. So if I copy paste more columns, as you can see, we're creating, so because I defined fixed height, we're creating rows, right? And that will fit more and more, but it will keep the structure. So you have columns like a table. And I remember somebody asked me about tables a while ago, and that was like I said that we don't use tables a lot because we have CSS Grid, because it's much better and easier to work with. So yeah, this is columns. You can, without hard coding, you can do something like repeat and auto fit. So which means that it will, you can set min width, which is 100 pixels, and one fraction, which is dynamic value. And I will show you how to work with fractions in a few moments. But let's see what we will get. So here we have 4 equal, we're fitting all these columns in one row, but the min width should be 100 pixels. So if I shrink it and get to a point when it's less than 100 pixels, we will start creating new rows, right? We're just creating new rows, which is also nice. And we also have another one, which is autofill. So we are actually setting, it will basically create, this one is useless probably, but you just set in that create as many columns as you can. Each column should has 100 pixels, right? So, and it just fit automatically. You can add min max, and that will be that means that it will be based on the content inside. So for example, if I refresh, all of them have 100 pixels. But for example, if I add to this one, I'm not actually tried it now, so I might be wrong, but nah, it just keep, yeah, so it's useless. Min max is useless in this case. This is a bad example. So basically fill will basically put all your, it will create as many columns as it possibly can be created in one row based on this value, on this 100 pixels that I've defined. And if it's not enough space, it will create a new row. So yeah, like this. If you start shrinking, you have less columns, you might see. If we continue shrinking, we will get to a point when we start creating new rows. Yes. And now, when we will get to this point, we can have grid template rows, right? So same stuff, you can hard code how many rows you want to have. And you can see that, okay, so I want to have 3 rows, 100 pixels, auto, and 100 pixels. So you're basically creating a grid. So let's have like, so I want to have 3 columns and 3 rows, right? Let's try to see what we will get. If I hover, you can see that we have 3 rows and 3 columns. So the first row has 100 pixels of height. Next is auto, and this one, the last one, has 100 pixels height as well. So now you will fit all new blocks automatically into these cells. It will take the next available cell. So if I copy this one, paste inside, you can see that I'm just filling cell by cell. Every next one will take the next cell, right? So which is very, very useful. And the difference between what you might think, like, why do I want to use Flexbox? Why do I want to use CSS Grid if I can use Flexbox? And the thing is that with Flexbox, it's one-dimensional. So it takes your content and try to build layout based on your content. This is very important. So Flexbox takes your content and creates layout based on your content. CSS Grid, on the other hand, creates a grid and try to fit your content into the grid. So basically the main thing for the CSS Grid is the grid, and now it will populate this grid with your content. So content is not that important. So this is very, again, just memorize it, because you might get to the point where you'll be confused, like why it behaves like that. And CSS Grid is two-dimensional, right? So we can define the whole grid, like columns and rows, and now you can populate with content. So this is, again, very, very important. You need to memorize it. Okay, we can go wild. So besides like random columns and rows, we can actually create areas. So here I created an example for you. And to do that, you just use create template areas. And you saying, so each value will be the column, sorry. And you saying that for the first row, I want to have 3 columns, and all 3 columns should be occupied by header. So you haven't created header yet, but you're already declaring that here in 3 columns, I want to have header. On the second row, I want to, first 2 columns should be occupied by article, and the third one should be a site area. And the third row, I want to have footer for full width, like all 3 columns, right? And if now I can take a header, which is a child. I can go here to show you. So I have my container areas, and inside I have 4 children, right? Header, ads, article, and footer. It doesn't matter which order is it. I can change the order, because I'm selecting them by class and putting into specific cells. So, ooh, somebody's joined. Right. Hello. Yeah. So the point is that you basically giving a label to each cell, and you can, if you put the same label into the cell, into some cell, that means that it will use as one thing. And remember, you can't have like article and article here. It will break layout. It will not work. It should be a square. So I can have something like this. So that will work, because it will be in a rectangle, right? Let's say. So it occupies the same area, but I can't do something like, oh, right, sorry. I can have this, should be footer, let's say. So this is a rectangle, 4 things. I can't do something like that, again, because it's not a rectangle anymore. Ooh. So I need to, sorry, I just formatted all my CSS. Yeah, so it should it should be like a rectangle. And in this case, we have rectangle in 1 row, another one here, another here, and the first row, right? So for the header, I want to put it into grid area header. So this element, it can be kitten if I have this class there in my HTML, but it will take all these 3 columns. So let's refresh. You can see it takes 3 columns. These elements are broken now because we haven't assigned any area to them. So what I will do is, for my article, I want to have article. For a site, I want to have a site. So for ad, because you know the default layout for any page, for like article page, or like many websites use it. So article in the middle, and on the side you have some ads or something. And for my footer, I want to put it into the footer area, right? So let's refresh, and here you are. And now if you like moving and changing the width, it doesn't matter. It will keep the layout, because you build you like draw a layout for this thing, and it behaves like a table now. And all this is responsive, but you can actually define the width and height for each cell and column. So right, so you marked every single cell with template areas, and you can define now columns. So first column is 200 pixels, then auto, then 200 pixels, and rows 100, auto, 100. So let's check how that will work. So basically for header 100 pixels, for footer 100 pixels, and the rest of the content will be auto. And for columns, first column 200, second responsive, and last one 200. So refresh, and you can see that this one has 100 pixels, right? And for example, if I change the height for this container, let's say height, I don't know, 800 pixels, you can see that we still have 100 and 100, and this is responsive. So it's very easy to build responsive design and responsive layouts, because you just define in areas, and now you add in more content inside your article, it will grow, and that will expand everything, but the whole layout will stay in the same place, which is again much more easier than you can do that with just CSS, plain CSS, let's say, and or Flexbox. Okay. Any questions for now? Any? No? Okay, so on the project, I would suggest you to use it and try to play with Css Grid. You have a lot of layouts there, and you'll see how that can be useful for your project. So please use it. So grid template, which is basically a combination, you can like a short syntax for columns and rows, right? It's just a short syntax. To be honest, I never use short syntax because, I don't know, for me it's less readable. It's better to have like grid template columns, grid template rows, but you have the ability to have this like responsive, short syntax for layout. Very easy to style, just like magic. So the next challenge that you normally have is, okay, yes, this is a link about complete guide. Yeah, good, thank you. This link actually is very helpful. So the next step is that, the next challenge is that, okay, how I can create a gap between each column, because sometimes you want to, you can play with these margins, left, margin right, etc. to create spacing. It's very easy with CSS Grid again, because all you need to do is just set grid column gap, 20 pixels. You're done. The whole column, each column has this gap, right? So you can see that it's actually like in the space, it actually dividing it. So you have this gap, and the same for rows. Grid row gap, 10 pixels, beautiful. And you have nicely built your layout with gaps, right? And you can have something like grid, you can, again, short syntax, you can use it and have columns and rows. So you can just combine them. But again, I normally use separately because it's easier to read. So that will be the same result. Okay. Next step is justify items. So by default, it is stretch, but you can justify to start. So let me refresh. And as you can see, that will be based on the content and align to the start. We can have center, again, based on the content, size will be based on the content, and you put in within the CSS Grid Container, you'll put it into the middle, horizontally, and end, right? The last one. I'm putting to the end. Can anyone tell me why it works with end and ignore center, start, or stretch now?
Because CSS is a cascading style sheet, so it takes the last thing that's been declared and ignores the things before.
Exactly, yeah. So because it just takes the last value that I've declared for the same property. So I'm basically overwriting it. Kind of like JavaScript, right? So if you have like equal center in JavaScript and then equal end, you're basically overwriting. So yeah, you're absolutely right, thank you. So the next step is for align items. You might guess from CSS, from the flexbox that it is vertical alignment. Again, as you might notice, that you're actually aligning within the row. So we have 3 rows and it's aligned within the row, right? This is important. And again, center. So on each row it will be centered, and align items end. That will be put into the end of each row. And again, this one is a combination of both. Place item center will mean that we're just putting it into the middle of each row and align horizontally, sorry, right? If I hover on this one, you can see that we have 3 columns. And actually, let me show you. So do we have? I just want to show you that if you have a few columns, create template columns, repeat 2 times 1 fraction. So and we have our align items, and so we have 2 columns, and if we set justify items center, as you can see, it will be aligned. So align items and justify items will be aligned within the cell, right? So it's actually aligning within the cell, not as in Flexbox, like in the whole container, but within the cell. And we have some stuff to align within the whole table. So basically you're aligning columns and cells. So you can see that here we have 3 columns, right? And we have some spare space on the right, this blue space. So now with justify content, not items, you can move cells. And if I go here, I have, so basically start is a default value. It's already here. Center. So before I refresh, you can see that it is on the 3 columns on the left. If I refresh, now my 3 columns is in the middle. So I'm moving columns, not the content inside columns, but actual columns. Same for end. Then we have stretch, which basically does nothing because we hard coded the widths. Then we have space around. Again, from Flexbox, we have space between and space evenly, right? And actually, I just want to show you that we're moving columns. It's not the content. So again, CSS Grid is all about grids. It's about stylings and layouts, not about your content. It just fits your content into the grid, into the layout. Great. Same with align content. So for align content, start again on the beginning, center. So we're moving the whole row, right? So now our rows align to the center. Again, and I mean, it's probably nothing to show. We have space around, space between, a space evenly, right? Same thing. Next stop. So this is a combination again. Place content. This is columns. This is rows. Refresh. It is here. And if we hover, you can see that we have tiny cells, right? And columns. Great. So next thing, we have grid auto columns, which means that if you have fixed height, as I have, I can set that if I'm adding my content, it should create columns automatically, and I want to set my grid auto columns to 200 pixels each column, right? And you might notice that Autoflow is column, so my content comes from top to bottom, and because we have fixed height, it will start create new columns. So let me just hover on this one, and you can see that we have a lot of cells, and if I start remove, we're just removing the column basically. See that now we have just only 2 columns, and again removing, we have 1. But if I start adding, we're just adding more and more and more and more, right? It keep creating columns for you automatically. So if you, for example, you have a list and you're looping through it, like appending 20 items, it will keep your layout and just create automatically your columns or create automatically your rows, because you can have grid auto rows. And to do that, again, you've set in the row height, or you might not want to set row height. It can be auto and will be based on the tallest element in the row. But if I refresh and start adding elements, right, we're creating. So this is like a very useful case for any layout, for any list of items like cards or items. Let's say you want to render a list of products, right? As we have in our design, you have a page with product listing page, and there you have a layout where you have a lot of products. And with JavaScript, you just take an array of products, append into the DOM to this container, and that will automatically build this layout for you. So you don't need to play with all these margins, spacing, etc. You just know this is CSS Grid Container, and I'm appending 20 elements, and that will create my layout nicely for me. So you'll spend very little time for CSS. Questions on that one? No? Question? No, come on. Okay, so the next step is Autoflow. So by default, as you can see that we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you have just it filling the next available cell. But you can be very specific, and you can set that for specific item, for specific element, you might say that I actually want to start from the row 2, right? Third item should start from row 2. And as you can see, row 2 is already used with item 2. So it will create a new column and put it into the second row. Because it will, if it doesn't have the available cell in this column in this position, it will create a new column to make it available and put it there, and the following items will start from there. So you will have 4 and 5 here. And the same with columns, right? So yeah, if you refresh, Autoflow, yeah, you might say that this specific thing, if you define the column where to start, it will put these elements back, but you'll create like, you'll put it into specific place. So column 2 and row 2 as well. And this will go to the very beginning. The next thing that I want to show you is just magic. It's literally magic. I still don't understand how it works. But imagine that you have a bunch of images with different shapes, right? Square, big square, small square, some rectangle, vertically aligned, horizontally aligned, and you want to create a nice layout for it to fit all of them. Like to put, and you want to avoid all these gaps because you don't know the order of these items. You don't know in which order they will come to you. You just want to fit them and have a nice random layout. So with CSS Grid, all you need to add is just Grid Autoflow dense, and look at this. Done. Can you imagine how much work you need to do with regular CSS to do this? One line, it automatically dents everything, and now you don't have any gaps. It's smart enough just to fit everything. It's just literally magic. Because to be honest, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, I can't imagine how much time you will spend to build it. And the funny part is that this is responsive, right? So I'll start changing my layout and it is responsive, which is crazy. So because we don't have enough elements, don't have enough small elements, we can't fit it here, these gaps. It probably can be more smarter and move this here and use these two here, but it takes the next element and try to fit into the previous gap. That is why it's fitting here. But still, it's so easy to build, which is just crazy. That is why CSS Grid is super powerful. Questions on this one?
Was that done on the whole container?
Yeah. So so you always we've discussed only for CSS Grid containers.
Okay.
So here, this is my container. I have max width, gap, and template column. So I'm repeating all columns with minimum 150 pixels or one fraction, which is dynamic one, and I'll show you what is that. And yeah, I'll probably need to show it to you now. And we have rows, automatic rows, 150 pixels, because I'm based on this one. Mm-hmm. So you have squares, a lot of squares basically. And yeah, and then you use Grid Autoflow. Okay, so about fractions, this one fraction. So this is fun part. We will do some math. Imagine, just avoid all of this for now. Or maybe I can scroll to the very top where we have declaration of columns. Yeah. Okay, so imagine that this container width. Can we have something? Give me a second. So width of this container is 1000 pixels, right? So if I put that I want to have one column with one fraction, that basically is 1,000 pixels. If I put that I want to have two columns, one fraction and one fraction, that means that it will split equally this, and that will be 500 pixels and 500 pixels. If I go further and say I want to have the first column one fraction, because fraction is responsive, so if you start resizing, it will take the percentage of the container width. If I set to 2, this one, so now in total we have 3, right? So now 1000 divided by 3, so this one will be 333 pixels, and this one will take 666 pixels, right? If you put to 3, for example, so now you dividing your 1000, your parent width, into 4, and then you will take, basically this one will be 250 and this one 750. Does it make sense? Yeah. Yes, okay. Okay. So let's do some exercise. I have 1000 pixels width. I want to first column should has 150 pixels. Second column should be 3 fractions, and third column should be 150 pixels. 150 pixels, and the next one, let's say 2 fractions. Can you tell me what is the value of 3 fractions here, and what is the value of 2 fractions? Just tell me what how do I need to write my math? Tell me. Anyone?
So 1000 minus 300, because 300 has already been taken.
Yeah.
And so that's the 700 pixels remain.
Yep.
So 3 friction and 3 friction. Now you can formulate it if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, so what do I need to do next? So I have 700
Divide
pixels.
that by 3.
Sorry?
Divide 700 by 3 to get the 3 fraction.
Divide by 3.
I think.
Okay.
Divided by 5.
Yeah, divided by 5. Because altogether fractions, we have 5 fractions. So each fraction will be 140 pixels. So this one will be 280 and this one will be 320, right? So you always take your free space, in our case 700, you're right, and divide it by total amount of fractions. And then you multiply in each. Yep. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Great. Yeah, this is tricky one, but you'll get used to some simple math, and you'll be fine. Okay, so the next part is our grid items. So grid items, basically now we can manipulate each element separately. So let me just scroll to our grid autoflow, grid items. Yeah, so you can be very specific and say that I want to set. So I have my item size. Wait a sec, grid repeat template. Yeah, so I'm combining, like we have 4 columns and we have 5 rows. So I'm saying that this particular item should be on the second column, that should start on the second column. And this is stupid part of CSS Grid, because when you're saying second, that means it's after the second, and when you have end, that includes end. So you have, so you're starting with it, wait a second. So it includes, vice versa. So it includes second, as you expect, so starting from the second, but it goes up to fifths. So it's not including fifths. So right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 2 and up to 5. For me, it just doesn't make sense. If you want,
they use the lines. So if you start from the leftmost line, that would be number 1. Then the next one is 2. Then the next one is 3. The next one is 4, and then the last one is 5. So they use the lines.
Yeah, but here we have 2 to 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 2 is 1, 2, which is correct. And 3, 4, and I would expect that 5 should be included.
Yeah, so it's the borders. So if you start from the left, it's the
You mean this one?
Go to the left one more. So that line would be number 1.
Okay.
And then the next line would be number 2. Then
Okay.
the next line is 3. The next line 4, and then that final line is 5.
Okay. So you're saying, are you talking about? Yeah, but that here we have the line on the very beginning and line in the end of the cell.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of lines you're counting? Sorry.
I wish there was a way I could overlay it, but
I think what he's saying up to the borders.
mm-hmm.
So he's including the borders, like from the border of the 2, which is the entire box, up to the 5. Probably is that what you want to say, Dan?
It's literally just the vertical lines. So the very first will be the start. That's line number 1.
This one.
And the next one is
But next one is this one.
That's 2. That's because we put the gutter there. Yeah.
Yes, we just
Oh,
started
okay,
the-
okay, yeah. Let's remove gutter. Okay, no problem. Give me a second. Okay, so second line, third line.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, fifth line. Yeah, still doesn't make sense. Yeah, I mean, they definitely have some logic behind that. But for me, again, if you're saying second, I would say that this is second column. I'm not expecting that you counting actually, because the property names grid column. So I'm expecting that this should be in second column, which it is,
Mm-hmm.
and column and fifth column. So I am expecting that you will take your fifth column.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is up to fifths, and you need to remember that. And again, you can set row start and row end, and that will behave in the same way. So you're starting from the second and go up to fourth one. So you can easily position your element separately, each element specifically. Okay, so the next step is just a grid call. Oh, sorry. So you can combine like grid column 2 and so from 2 to fifths, and grid rows from 2 to fourths, and you'll have the same result. So if I commented out all of that, it's just it's just a short syntax. We still have it here. And yeah, so justify self, you might guess that you just justifying the element, right? Within the cell, within the column. Justify self because it's horizontal, so it's within the column, and center. So sometimes it is useful. Yeah. And the same for vertical alignment. Nothing crazy. So vertical alignment within the cell. And same for the center. And for the place self, it's just a combination. Let me just show you. Okay. Hey, sorry. Where is it? Yeah, sorry. This one. Just a combination. Come on, where you are? Oh, pretty sure. Oh yeah, sorry, this is description. So center and stretch, right? So it goes to the center and stretch, take the full width. So these are properties for items, CSS grid items. Not much, but oh, by the way, sorry, let's go back to slides because I want to show you. So here I put all descriptions for each, and you can see all of them. Check the layouts, everything, and as usual, because we all like games, we have CSS Grid Garden, which is great because you can start playing with your and basically practice your CSS Grid. 28 levels, should be fun. But again, it's like all this stuff. You need to write your CSS, and you need to write your CSS Grid. Use CSS Grid to learn it and memorize it, because it's nothing smart. Like if in programming, like in JavaScript, you need to think about like logic, the flow, etc. Like a lot of things. With CSS, it's more about imagination and just memorizing this, like the specific commands. So to memorize them, you need to write them again and again to be able to just recreate it in the future. So I strongly recommend to use CSS Grid in your project. Also, don't think that if you use CSS Grid, you don't want to use Flexbox. You, like, in 100% cases, you use both. I think that, let me check that, can I use? This way. Great. So Internet Explorer actually doesn't support nested grids. So you need to, sometimes you want to create, because you have multiple levels, you might use JavaScript, you might use Flexbox for a main container, and inside you can use your CSS Grid to create layout, or maybe vice versa, you can use your CSS Grid for main layout to build like main grid, and then you can populate your content like here. So you will use your CSS Grid, build a layout, and then with Flexbox you'll just align all elements inside, because you might have multiple elements here and multiple sections, etc. It doesn't matter, but that will be just one item, and this CSS Grid item can have display flex, and you can apply all your flex stylings to this section. So you always combine CSS Grid and Flexbox. This is like 100% cases. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing that I want to show you is, so before we move, actually, any questions? No? Okay. I also want to talk with you about Sas and Pre-Processors. What about Bootstrap? What about Bootstrap? What do you mean?
I was thinking, why was what was the reason you didn't include it in the course? Probably Bootstrap is more faster and easier to use rather than the grid and the Flexbox, isn't it?
So the biggest difference between Bootstrap and Flexbox or CSS Grid is that CSS Grid is just another like part of CSS, and Bootstrap is just a library. So somebody wrote a lot of CSS for you, so you just can apply classes to style, because somebody already wrote like thousands lines of CSS and JavaScript, because this is a huge library. Bootstrap. Yeah. So can we go to their docs? Docs. So yeah, like Bootstrap, why we're not including into the course? Because this is just a library, and there is no point learn specific library. No, 0 point. You're basically learning somebody's code and how to use it. And we want to teach you how to use languages and how to use CSS, not the library. And again, to be honest, probably the second reason, I'm not a big fan of any libraries. So libraries are great when you try to mock something quickly, like you want to build quickly some website just to present, and this is it. And many companies, and especially startups, doing that using Bootstrap or Material UI or Ant, I think Ant. Is it Ant? How do you spell it? I don't remember the spelling for this. But anyway, like Material UI, library. This is React Material React library. React. And you can basically just copy paste in components, right? So you can just go to, like, I don't know, drop down components, and let me find it. Vision guys, custom component here, components, contains grid list, box, slider. They have inputs, navigations, data, display, util. So anyway, you have a lot, everything, basically, and you can like copy paste it and have it. But the problem is all these libraries. When you build in like a basic thing, it's great to use some library, whatever you want. But when you get to the point that you want to build a proper thing, to customize it, it's very hard to use libraries because you have no control on library. And that means that if you want to add some extra functionality to that, it might be very, very, very painful, because you have no control and you tried somehow to trick the code and somehow hook to their logic to add your functionality. And sometimes it's just impossible. And this is what we have with my current company. They use Material UI, this particular library, and we building like tables, and we want to have editable tables. We also use for editable tables. We use React data grid, I think, library, another library, and it looks nice. It's like, oh my god, it's so easy. Like examples, you can quickly have a table which is editable, and so you can modify it, and it works beautifully. But you will get to the point when you need to add some icons inside. Then you want to have some validation, your custom validation, and you want to add some fixed column and many other things. And it's so complicated to hook to their code because of their code lifecycle, of the re-rendering, etc. And sometimes it's just impossible. And you drop in some functionality because you have no control on their library. So that is why I'm not a big fan of libraries. If you want to present something like mock some website, quickly build it, yes, you can use library. You can just go to like Bootstrap, read documentation, find like, I don't know, for example, carousel, right? And you have carousels here, beautiful, one slide, first slide, you can slide in, and you basically just copy pasting code. But how do you feel about just copy pasting? It's not actually development, just copy pasting. And you have, again, you don't have any control on that. You can use their functionality and try to hook somehow. Sometimes it's completely fine because all you need is to have this carousel with 3 dots, right? And you don't care about that. But imagine that, okay, you have the whole website, you need one carousel, one tiny carousel, and you think, okay, I have a bootstrap. I will add bootstrap to my website. And this is very bad approach because you take in the whole library, a few, I don't know, probably 100 kilobytes or even megabyte, add into your website because of the very tiny carousel. You're slowing down your performance of the whole website for every single visitor because of that carousel. Instead, you can create your own carousel, which will be very small and you will not waste the whole all this space. And this is the same. So library, basically, it's a library. So that means that imagine that you want to have to read some book. So you say, okay, because I might want to read this book, I will take all these 10,000 books in case I need to read this one. And this is it. So it's just wasting of resources to load all of that, to bring it to your website, etc. And again, it's very tricky, like conversation, I would say, about libraries. But I like for all our projects, we don't allow you to use any libraries because you need to learn how to write your own code. Copy pasting, after our bootcamp, when you are able to create your own stuff, you definitely find a way to copy paste, and you'll know how to do that. That is why our focus is to teach you how to write your stuff. And yeah, personally, I just hate libraries because you have less control on them. And I'm micromanager in code. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay. Who heard about Sas and Pre-Processors?
Me?
Okay. So, can you tell us what is Sas? And why do we want to use it?
Sas is a preprocessor of a scanning style sheet, actually speeding your coding process because you can apply variables, you can apply functions to Sas.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So yeah, Sas basically is CSS with superpowers. Why is that? Because you can write much leaner and reusable CSS. You can actually start reusing your CSS whenever you need. You can create, as Theodora mentioned, variables, functions. You can build blocks of some CSS and include it in different places with just include, and you'll be able to reuse this code. And your code starts much leaner, and you'll write less code. And in the end of the day, it will be compiled into the huge file of CSS. But for developer, it's much more simple to write Sas because you will write less code. But again, in the end of the day, that will be compiled into CSS because any browser does not understand Sas. So that is why it's preprocessor, because you write in Sas, it will compile into CSS, and then it will work. So let me show you some examples. We'll talk about Sas more on the next lesson on Thursday, but I just want to show you some basic setup, how it works, and yeah, basically how it works. We will probably do some maybe gulp setup or something, but we'll see. So, sorry. Okay, let me just go to this one, and I want to create a Sas folder. Probably I can create a new project. One more second. I will open terminal. Can anyone tell me how to create? I know that we didn't teach you that stuff, but you may know how to create a folder from terminal.
Make directory, mkdir.
Yes, and the folder name. And let's say Sas. And to combine a few commands, so I can click enter and I'll create this folder. But to combine a few commands, you use ampersand, and then I want to cd to navigate to this new folder that I've just created. And maybe I can create a file. So there is a difference between directory and file. So to create a file, you use touch and have like, yeah, we probably want to do like, okay, index HTML. Beautiful. So as you can see, we jumped straight away to Sas, right? Okay, and we have our index. So to use Sas again, we need to start to make some setup, and to how to do that, you can find in their docs. So install. I already have. Yeah, we probably need to install. So npm install -g, which is global, and Sas. And I'm sure that I have it, but let's do it together again. So all I need to do is just npm install. I don't have an access, so I need to do sudo. Phew, we have some updates. I'm obsessed with latest version of anything. I'm actually not a few, even like pretty often, let's say, I'm a victim of this. I want to have the latest version, and I'm installing some latest version, and wait a second. All right, sudo again, and it's not working properly, and I'm just going back to the old version. But it's always fun, something new. I was the person who installed pre-alpha of Windows 7 a few years ago. That was really funny. It was like 8 years ago or something. Okay, so we installed our npm module, right? And here I want to create a folder styles, and there I want to create let's say a file. I want to create Sas folder, and I want to create CSS folder. And yes, so here I want to create index as CSS. So the preprocessor called Sas, but the format is SCSS. So you might heard Sas or SCSS. Yeah, and here I want to have index CSS. Sorry. So I'm creating these two files, right? CSS and Sas. And now, if I try, let's say h1, and here hello. So open index HTML. So we have hello, right? And I want to style it with index SCSS. So h1, and I will write color, I don't know, green. So I can't add it here because, as I said, styles Sas and index, that will not work because browsers don't understand what's going on and what is Sas, so it just doesn't work. So we need to compile it, and you want to compile it into index. So let's index CSS. So if you go to their docs, they're actually saying that you want to run Sas like pass to your SCSS and another path to where it should be compiled, right? So in our case, I want to run Sas, then I want to go to styles, SCSS, oh, sorry, Sas. Yeah, I probably need to name it actually. So, and here it should be CSS, right? So we want to link CSS file. So Sas and index, CSS index, and the next, so this is where I want to take my code, and then this is where I want to put my code. So styles, CSS and index CSS, right? So if I run this, so look at this here. So my index CSS is empty, but my SCSS has some stylings. So if I run this command, you can see that now it's compiled and I have my H1 here, right? And your compiler will create a map where you'll have the source and where it's mapping to which file. And because, and because it is in this folder, this map in this folder, the whole path is just index.css. So it will automatically create your map. So sometimes for your git ignore, you will add files as CSS. You will have something like in your git ignore, you'll have something like start.scss.map, right? So you'll ignore all files with this extension. Okay, so, but again, it's annoying, right? Because if I add another stylings, let's say background color to some antique white, again, it's not here, I need to run my command again. So now I have it, but I can run this command with the attribute watch. So now, every time I will add something here, font size to M, save, you can see that it's compiled, and if I go to the file, I have it here. And you were saying, what's the point? Syntax is absolutely the same, right? But the problem, not the problem, the benefit is that we have a lot of things with Sas. First, which is very, very useful, is nesting. So nesting is basically where you can scope your stylings based on the structure of your Sas. So what it means, that if I have, let's say, I don't know, the main, and there I have H1, and I have the just H1, I know, inside div, inside main div, just H1. So, and I want to style my H1, right? This inside my main div. So what I can do is dot main div, right? So I'm selecting my main, and I'm putting my H1 inside within these brackets, So I want to style all H1s that are inside my main, right? So, and you will see that when I save, look in this code. So I'm saving, and that will be compiled into main space H1, right? And we can add more levels, like, I don't know, UL, li, item, maybe with some class, list, and I might have something like dot list, and we have a li, and here we have color, I don't know, pink is too blue, yeah, blue, let's say blue, right? Save, and that will be compiled into this one. So main list li, just regular CSS, and you're just wrapping, and that will look for the element li, which is inside list, which is inside main. And if you go back, refresh, we have our item, right? Which is very, very helpful. But for example, you want to have a hover. Again, I'm briefly showing you the basic syntax, but we will talk about that on the next lesson. You want to have, maybe you want to have a variable. So why we use variables? Because imagine that you will create a theme for whole website. So you don't want to go through each like green color, right? You have, let's say you have a violet, some very specific shade of violet on the whole website, and you have something like, let me just pick this violet. Some very specific shade of violet, and imagine that I want to use this violet here as well, right? And maybe a few other places, maybe I don't know, background color, that probably will be useless. Color, that will be again the same violet. So it's annoying. So now imagine that you have a few more hundreds of these violets across I don't know, 50 CSS files. So now if some designer, because they are mad people, they will come to you and like, you know what, this shade is wrong, we actually want to have this shade. And like, really? And for you, if you use just CSS, you will spend a day just to go through the whole website and change all of that, or at least like hour or 2 hours. But if you use theme, you will create like a custom violet variable and assign this value. So now you will use this value here, sorry. You'll use your violet here, you'll use a violet here, and you'll use violet here, right? So save, and now if your crazy designer will come to you again and say, can you change actually from violet to green? You just change the green, and you have, and probably wrong saying to have green and violet, but let's say you want to change, adjust the shade of violet, you can adjust it in one place and you're done. And if you save, go to your code, and you will see that you have color, that equals to this one, which is very helpful. And all like big company, like not big, all companies use themes, and like so you normally have in any project you have something like theme.scss, and here you have all your colors or all your font sizes, like title, I don't know, font size, and you have like 2 amps, let's say, like this, and you have like, or maybe probably, so I saw people use kebab case, something like that, and you have like subtitle, font size. And you have maybe 1.5 am, and you have some colors like primary, let's say, and you have your blue, and you have secondary, and you have your green. And now to use it, all you need to do is just have import sorry, is it import? Yeah, import, and you put your theme as CSS, and now your variables are accessible here. So so you can use secondary and have your violet, secondary, secondary, and secondary. Save, and now you go here, you have all green color here, right? Or you can change your secondary to primary, save, and you have blue here, which is very useful. And this is, again, this is typical setup, that you have like a theme, huge theme file where you use your libraries, your variables, and you have some mixins. We will talk about what is that and how it works on the next lesson, but this is the whole point, that you can play with variables. Then other thing, like a quick, this is, I'm just introducing the basic things. If you want to have a hover for a line, right? How to actually use it? How to set hover? Do you need to write like this? You can do that, but instead you can use ampersand, which is refers to the parent, to the element actually, so which means to a line. So now you're styling your hover, and yes, you basically write some stuff for hover. I don't know, color secondary, let's say. We can remove this background. Oh yeah, let's try actually. So you can read when you hover, you can see some secondary green, right? I can probably pick better colors for that example, but you got the point. And yeah, everything is compiling. If you go to index, you can see that it's main, list, ally, and hover. So it's compiling to actual CSS. And we use different setups like Webpack, and we will talk about that in this course. We will talk about Gulp, which will, every time you write your CSS, it will compile into CSS and will minify, and your CSS, I'll show you an example of minified CSS. Minifier. Your CSS will look like this. So when you open your CSS file, that will be something like that, but much longer, just to compress and optimize the file size, again for loading and speed. Yes, I think that this is like a very basics for preprocessors. Again, I strongly recommend you, because nobody use CSS for stylings, like nobody, because everybody is using SCSS or less, which is the alternative, but it's like 90% of cases, like 90% of companies use SCSS, and 10% or maybe even less use less, which is alternative for SCSS. So, but again, everybody's using preprocessors. So you need, I strongly recommend you from today write only SCSS, because you need to learn the syntax, and you still, like in general, you still write your CSS, and you definitely can write something like .main h1, and that will be the same as this one, but now you're not benefiting from this nesting thing, from the scoping, and you need to write these long things. But it's just an extra thing. So all CSS syntax is 100% valid here in SCSS, but you can use extra features to make it more flexible, more reusable, and more scalable. Yes. So again, you from now on use SCSS for everything we will build, because this is the main thing that you will use as a front-end developer. Do you have any questions? Good question. Can you be more descriptive, Mushtaq, please? Oh.
Yeah, sorry. You know, when you pick a variable name, the dollar was just before it. So we're just wondering, the dollar is the keyword and you have to put it just before every variable name.
Yeah,
Is
yes.
that the dollar?
So you need to use $sign to set that this is a variable. You can't use like this.
Uh-huh.
This is like a requirement. Declaring a variable, use $sign. And actually, if we go to our docs, variables, they are saying that you need to use your $sign here, basically. You assign a value to a name that begins with $. So yes, $sign is a requirement.
I also have seen, I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you can also have variables in CSS.
Yeah, so this is a new thing that just were introduced, just like CSS variables. But it's not very popular, and I bet it's not supported with the browsers. Let me check. Good old friend, right? Yeah. But anyway, even if it's introduced and you can have some, and it's not supported by Internet Explorer, but even if you can use variables, it's still far from the power of Sas. Like very far. CSS is like completely different league, and you just need to write again. You will see when we will talk about all of that on the next lesson, but you will see that how many features Sas has and why it's that powerful. It's kind of like CSS Grid for CSS. The Sas is for CSS. It's like just the game changer, and yeah, it is very important for you because every single company uses preprocessor because of this reusability. You can include your CSS files, SCSS files into other SCSS files like import, and yeah, many other things. Yeah. Anything else? No?
Maybe a little bit more explanation about the structure, like starts from the main and goes downwards. A little bit more explanation, if you could, please.
Yeah, sure. So regarding the structure, you're basically creating blocks, and you always start from the top. So if I have let's say I have a main, I have class footer, for example, right? So these are like main containers for us. That is why I'm starting from the top level of the container, so I can go and style every single section there, like main. And I know that this is like very individual container, and you just build in the path, basically like a path to your elements, right? So in our case here for main, we have a list inside. So you need to define, like it's not a requirement, so you can do this, and you will select all allies inside main, right? But if you create, let's say another UL or OL, let's say ordered list, and have ally, now we will select this one as well. And I always strongly recommend, and this is what I'm doing on my job, that every time, even if you don't have any stylings for the list, you still want to wrap it into the list. Don't do directly, because you don't want to write any stylings now for your list, but later maybe you need to come and like, okay, just you need to create a new line and set background color, background color, and set primary, right? And you don't need to wrap and refactor all your code, because if you don't have it, and this is a huge thing, so here it's like a tiny, so you're saying, okay, it's not crazy, but so you can go here and like list, because you want to add a background, copy here, go there, copy, and then write your background color and have your primary. So it's not like a very complicated. But again, if you have a huge CSS file and you have a lot of lines of code and each section is a huge, you always want to wrap the whole, basically your building path with every single level. So you're not skipping any level, because on any point of time in future, you can come and just add a new line if you want to style this particular element. So you have all these wrappers. You have main, list, and a line. And maybe if I have anchor inside, I will have anchor. Let's say, because here you'll have an anchor. So this is how you build in your path. And I don't know, cursor, pointer, yeah, something like that. I don't know. But the whole point is that you build, the whole structure is you going from the top container and going down. So main, so right, this is your top container for this section. So main, then you have list, then you have a line, then you have anchor. And this one is again top container, and you're going down inside. So for my footer, we will have h1 as well, and we can style this h1 inside. And it's very easy to manage, because when you're scrolling through huge file, you can just, okay, close it, and you can see that, okay, this is a big one, where is it? Okay, this is it. You can easily find your codes, because you already, when you start scrolling and you're like, okay, I need to style a list in the main, right? So you're just looking for main, like, okay, I found the main, so now I need to look for the list. Okay, I found the list, and now I can style it here. It's very easy to find, because you have this structure, you have these modules, let's say. Does it make sense? Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so again, we will talk, the next lesson is all about SCSS, and yeah, I'll show you main functionality, I'll show you how to create mixins, functions, variables, like all of that. And yeah, we will talk about this on the next lesson. Do you have any questions maybe about project? Have you checked the design? Maybe you have any questions about project? No? So Sam was really good last lesson, right? That you don't have any questions. Beautiful. So I hope that you'll smash this project, because you're super confident. Okay. Okay. Yes, then. Thank you. Yeah, we finishing earlier, but I'll send you all materials, all example CSS as usual, basically, and upload video now, so it should be by tomorrow morning. Okay, thank you, thanks a lot, and I see you on Thursday.
See you guys later.
See ya. Bye.